Now the edge may fail and falter depending on what you're doing, but on the whole, the blade, the slab of steel in your hand, I think is going to hold up pretty well. Hello my friends, it's a late Boy Scout and this is my review of the Cold Steel Spike Knives. The new for 2013 version of the Spike Knives. These are the ones that I've been most interested in. When I saw that the design and just the engineering of this knife had been completely redone, I was pretty interested. The old version I'm rolling some pictures in, not so interested in those. They were made with cord wrapped handles, the steel was 420, not super interested in any of that. Virtually no finger choil to protect your finger from sliding forward at all. Not real interested in that old version of the Spike at all. But when Cold Steel released this version, or at least when they announced it and showed pictures of it, I was pretty interested. When I got it in hand and discovered that yes, it is completely full tang, I was like, yeah, I want to try that thing out. Absolutely, I want to try it out. A 2.3 ounce fixed blade knife, 4 inches long for the blade. Yeah, I want to see what that thing can do. Now, the steel on this one has changed from the 420 that the previous version was. This one is now 4116 Krupp, a German steel that I've been interested in trying out. All the reports that I've read, not too favorable. So I decided I was going to try it out for myself, though, and find out what kind of an edge it held, how durable that steel was, and so forth. And I'm going to report on that in this review. So stick around for my assessment of that steel. Also, I want to talk a little bit in this review about sort of the ideas, the role that I see a fixed blade like this fitting into. Certainly not an outdoors knife, although I did test it on wood and so forth. What role does a fixed blade knife like this fit into? Well, Cold Steel markets it as a tactical neck knife. And that's kind of how I see it too, but except for the neck knife part. I just am not a neck knife guy. I don't know why it is. Well, no, I do know why it is. Some of you guys chime in, by the way, if you really dig neck knives, you love carrying knives around your neck. Chime in the comments section, talk about why it works for you. Here's why it doesn't work for me. Having that thing on in the first place, I'm not real comfortable with necklaces in the first place, okay? Just don't dig them. Then, having like a, it's about a 2.3 ounce knife, just the knife alone. Add the sheath, add the chain. I don't know what you're up to, probably 3.5, something like that, maybe 4 ounces. Have that hanging from your neck. Some of you guys are going to dig that. I'm not really liking it, okay? I don't care for bling like that hanging around my neck. But then, of course, it goes under your shirt, right? Or at least that's the idea if you're going to conceal it. Well, I don't really dig that either, because then it's kind of swinging back and forth as I walk, moving around as I bend over to pick up things, sliding around as I'm doing this or that. And, the neck knife thing does not lend itself to an active daily lifestyle to me, all right? So I don't really care for wearing a neck knife. So how do I see this thing being carried? Well, might as well talk about that now since I've eliminated the neck knife thing. However, I'll mention quickly that Cold Steel does recommend it as a neck knife, and that's why they include this little beaded chain here, which seems very, very stout, very tough. And of course, that would work by weaving the chain through some of these little things right here and hanging it around your neck like that. Okay, so that's how that would work. If you choose to use the chain, it comes with one. So how would I carry this since I won't carry it as a neck knife? Well, two ways that I found that work pretty well. First one I'll talk about that I haven't tried at all, and that is the TechLock option. Cold Steel mentions that this sheath is TechLock compatible. I don't have any TechLocks to test that out with. Blade Tech makes the TechLock from what I understand. Haven't even tried them out, but I've read a little bit about them. I know folks that use them. Basically, it's a kind of a universal belt mount for sheaths, for magazine holders, things like that, maybe holsters, I'm not sure. A big variety of things work with the TechLock, making something like this that they don't want to necessarily give you a clip for into something that you can attach a clip to very easily. It's like $15 for your TechLock. And then you can turn something like this into something that you could wear on your belt. However, I don't know how well that would work inside the waistband, and that's what I wanted to try. Here's how I set mine up to work. And you can see that I got some paracord on there now. I'm going to talk about it. So the way that I did this was I threaded my belt through these two paracord loops that I created. You can see that they kind of wrap around here, come through here. I did a little bit of just an overhand knot and then cut that and singed it. Same thing on that end. And it holds pretty nicely. It's just a really simple kind of a way to do this. Anyway, so I would thread my belt through here, okay, through these two loops, like that. And then I would, with the belt obviously on the outside of my pants, I would then slip the sheath down on the inside of my pants, and that way have an inside the waistband carried knife. And it would hide about like that. As long as I've got a shirt covering it up, you never see that thing, especially if it's on my strong side. You'll never ever see it. Now, that does shift side to side a little bit, for sure, but I've noticed that it doesn't do it so much that it becomes uncomfortable. And really at no point during the day when I wore these things and sat with them all day long and drove around with them all day long inside the waistband, at no point did it ever turn to the point that it was uncomfortable or that it became really obvious, you know, by poking out from my shirt and printing, so to speak. It never became so obvious that, you know, that I had a knife there. And so, yeah, I think that method of carry works pretty well. You can draw from it fairly quick, just as quick as you could a handgun or almost any other position that you might have your knife. And so I feel like that's a pretty good position to carry this knife if you choose to carry it as that sort of concealable fixed blade. Another good way to carry it if you want to is just in the sock, and you know, or a boot. If you wear boots on a daily basis, it'd probably work well in that. Find a way to keep it there inside your boot, mount it somehow. Or just, again, if you wear socks and they're tight enough, if they're loose-fitting socks, it's going to slip and kind of slide and go all the way down to your foot and not be comfortable. But if they're fairly tight, you can walk around in this thing for a good portion of the day, you know, sit, drive, all that stuff, and have this in your sock and get kind of to the point where you don't notice it. At least, you know, as much as you would anything else you have on your ankle. If you've ever carried a handgun on your ankle, you notice that, but you get comfortable with it. And same goes with the cold steel spike knife. So those are some carry options, ones that I've discovered. Go ahead and chime in the comments section to talk about ones that you like. Next, let's talk a little bit about the idea of a fixed blade for EDC. Why do you want a fixed blade when you can have a good folding knife? Well, the simple fact of it is that a fixed blade will virtually always hold up better to hard use than a folder will. It just has that torsional rigidity that a folding knife can never have. Torsional stress, that is to say the bending like this, you know, the prying sort of thing that I don't really want to do anyway. I probably wouldn't try to do, but if I ever had to, knowing that this knife could hold up to that better than a folding knife, absolutely that's a good reason to have a fixed blade instead of a folder, at least for certain applications. To have it on you if you can carry it and be comfortable with it, yeah, definitely. So let's talk about some folding knives. Here's the Spyderco Endura. So these two knives are fairly comparable in size. Blade length is fairly comparable. You can see that. However, there is a pivot here, okay, and liners holding that thing together as far as this torsional rigidity is concerned. And so will this hold up to the same torsional sort of stress that the spike knife will hold up to? No way. No way. I would bet all the money I've got that this one would hold up longer than this one would. Same goes with virtually any hard use folder that I can show you. There's the Benchmade 710 McHenry & Williams. Tough knife, tough steel, tough lock, but no way that's going to hold up to the same sort of torsional rigidity as any fixed blade. Even the softer steel, 41/16 steel. That's just, I mean, I think that's kind of inarguable. Maybe it can be proven that one of these folders will hold up longer than this particular steel will, but I think it's virtually, you know, you can't hardly argue the point. Even my beloved Spyderco Paramilitary 2, which I know to be a very tough knife, I don't believe that this would hold up to the same torsional pressure and stress that any fixed blade would. And the spike knife, a convenient fixed blade folder, could be good to have just for that reason. Now let's get on to some of the testing that I put this knife through. This one right here is what Cold Steel calls the drop point version of the spike, although I don't see that point dropping to any degree. Whatever. It's more like a Scandi point. Anyway, oh, by the way, they all had that Scandinavian grind on them, so that's very, very cool. You know, the one grind coming from the stock all the way down to the final edge makes for a pretty wicked initial edge out of box. And I do like that about the spike knife. Now this is the drop point here, that I initially started testing. And I put this through some pretty good beating, actually. I happened to be out and had some 2x4s available with this knife, and I was like, you know, I'm going to see how it does against some wood. So I batoned it for a little bit. Sure did. Carved away at that wood. I think it was pine. Whatever that 2x4 is made of, I'm not positive. But I carved away at it for a little while. I pounded on it for a little while to see what the knife could take and to see what the steel could take. And you can see right there, yeah, it's got some chips in the steel at the edge right there. And also you can just, if the light hits it just right, you can see that it's probably rolled in some spots, like right there. Looks like it's probably rolled a bit. So how does the 4116 steel hold up to hard use? Not too good. Not that great. I don't think 4116 is a really hard steel. I think it's a little too soft for real hard use. Good thing to know about that steel. Certainly not the intended application for this knife, but good to know what it can hold up to. Now I also took out this version right here, which is the Tokyo spike. Took this one out and did some testing with it. More sensible testing, I'd say, as far as EDC work is concerned. Started out slicing some paper, some newsprint, just to see how sharp that edge was, and it was razor sharp. Moved on to some cardboard, which it zipped through fast. I'll attribute that to the polished blade, which, you know, with no coating whatsoever on it, and also that Scandi grind, which just lends itself to some really nice slicing. So it zipped through that cardboard real fast, and I was just super impressed with the cutting ability of the blade, just the natural geometry of it, and how that lent itself to the cutting. Moved on to some wood, actually, some I think maple that I'd cleared from a nearby tree, pruned recently, and just kind of carved away at that for a little bit. Tested it out with some pretty standard carving techniques against the knee, and then sort of doing that reverse sort of power cut where you hold the knife backwards in your hand and pull the material across your chest. Doing some of that to see how the knife sort of held up, how it was in hand for those sorts of cuts. Cut away at those branches for a little while and discovered that this handle here, just, you know, it's fairly small, and doing a lot of hard cutting with it is kind of hard to get it done. You know, it's not really designed for that. So it's not going to be real comfortable in hand, but just as far as the performance of the steel and the performance of the blade and the edge, the geometry of that edge, did pretty nicely. And then in the end went back and tried to cut some of that newsprint, which didn't cut quite as nicely, but still did okay. So the edge held up okay, you know, not too bad. It's still got a decent edge on it. Not the same razor sharp one that came from the factory. No surprise there. So you see that I've got all four versions of the spike knife here on the table. I've only talked about two so far, so let's talk about the others. The one I think is most beautiful is this one right here, the Bowie. That is a beaut. Look at that. Really nice looking. I do like the look of that really fine point. That swedge cut out from the top there. And just a beautiful sweep to it. Real nice looking. I do like the look of that Bowie spike. Then moving on, there is the Tanto spike, which is likely to have the strongest tip of the bunch. And so if this is pretty much just going to be a stabber, an emergency knife for you, I don't know, that Tanto might be the one you want. Tanto, Tonto, I don't care what you prefer. Of course, the drop point I talked about before, which doesn't really drop at all, and the Tokyo spike, which has got that sort of interesting swedge cut out along the back. It's essentially the drop point, but, you know, with that swedge cut out. Anyway, they're all different, they're all interesting, they're all unique. Pick the one that you think is the coolest, starting at around $24 and ending up at around $26. these knives are actually pretty good buys for emergency EDC fixed blades. That is to say, emergency use of any kind, whether it be tactical or some other type of fixed blade use. I do think that being a fixed blade, like I said before, is just naturally going to hold up to more torsional stress or almost any kind of stress. Now, the edge may fail and falter depending on what you're doing, but on the whole, the blade, the slab of steel in your hand, I think is going to hold up pretty well. So the cold steel spike knives overall recommended for the intended purpose. Pretty cool knives and definitely affordable. I'm Late Boy Scout. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you guys later.